The oil lamp flickered beside an empty plate, and Silas Cray sat alone at a table set for two. One chair for him, one for a ghost who'd been dead 7 years. Outside, the wind had teeth. November in the Bitterroot meant snow by morning, and he could smell it coming, that metallic edge, that silence before the white. 12 rooms in this house, 40 head of horses in the barn, 600 cattle across 2,000 acres. And him, at the head of a table, built for 8, staring at a plate no one would touch. He didn't eat. Hadn't yet. The ritual came first. Light the lamp, set her place, sit and wait. For what? He couldn't say anymore. Forgiveness. A sign. The sound of her boots on the porch, maybe, though he knew she was ash and bone in a Butte cemetery, 3 weeks dead before he even got the letter. Forgive me, Papa. Those were her last words to him. Written, not spoken. He hadn't earned them. The knock came soft, too soft. A child's hand, maybe, or the wind playing tricks. Then again, harder, and a voice. Small, shaking, barely loud enough to hear through the door. Please, mister, it's cold. 2 girls stood on his porch, one holding the other upright, both blue-lipped and shaking, and the older one spoke first, voice steady despite the trembling. We don't need charity, sir, just a place to warm up. We'll be gone by morning. Silas didn't move. The cold poured in around them, biting at his stockinged feet, but he barely felt it. He was looking at the smaller one, 7, maybe 8, her eyes half closed, her weight sagging against her sister like a feed sack about to split. The older girl tightened her grip, 11, 12 at most, thin coat, patched at the elbows, no gloves. Her knuckles were raw and red, and she held her sister the way a woman holds a child she's been carrying too long. Please. The word cracked. She hadn't meant to say it. She's just tired. She'll be fine once she's warm. Behind him, the lamp flickered on the table. The empty plate gleamed. He stepped aside. Get in. The older girl hesitated. Smart. She'd learned not to trust open doors. But the little one shivered, lost a body heat, a sharp, rattling exhale, and that decided it. The older girl half carried, half dragged her sister across the threshold, and Silas closed the door against the wind. The warmth hit them like a wall. The little one made a sound, not crying, not laughing, something between, and her knees buckled. Her sister caught her, barely. The fire, Silas said. He was already moving. Get her by the fire. He didn't help them, didn't touch them, just built the flames higher, feeding split oak until the heat pushed back against the cold they'd brought in. The older girl lowered her sister onto the rug near the hearth, and the child curled there like a dog finding sun. Silas brought blankets. Didn't ask where they'd come from, how long they'd been walking, why 2 girls were alone on a night that would kill grown men. Questions could wait. Cold couldn't. Her hands. He gestured at the little one's fingers, white at the tips. Warm 'em slow. Rub too hard, it'll hurt worse. The older girl nodded. She knew. She'd done this before. He watched her work. Gentle. Gentle practiced? The kind of careful that came from repetition. And something shifted in his chest. Not warmth, not yet. Recognition, maybe. The look on her face was one he knew. The look of someone holding together what wanted to fall apart. He went to the stove. The soup was leftover, rabbit and root vegetables, made 2 days ago, for no one in particular. But it was hot, and he ladled it into 2 bowls without asking. When he turned back, the little one's eyes were open. She was looking at the table, at the empty plate across from his seat. Is that for the angels? Silas's hand stopped halfway to setting down the bowls. Nettie. The older girl's voice was sharp. Warning. Hush. But the child kept looking. Her voice was dreamy, half asleep. Mama said angels come on Thanksgiving? They sit at the tables of people who are sad. Is that their plate? The fire crackled. The wind pressed against the windows. Silas could feel the older girl watching him, tense, waiting for him to throw them out. He set the bowls on the table, not near the empty plate, on the other side. Something like that. The older girl's shoulders dropped a fraction. Relief she didn't want him to see. You hungry? He asked. No, sir. Automatic. A lie so practiced it came out smooth. Silas almost smiled. Almost. That's so. 'Cause I got more stew than one man can eat, and it'd be a shame to waste it on the hogs. He pulled out a chair, then another, sat down at his usual place and started eating, not looking at them, giving them room to decide. The older girl moved first. She helped her sister to the table, got her settled, then sat herself, straight-backed, hands in her lap, like she was waiting for permission. Eat, Silas said, before it gets cold. They ate. The little one, Nettie, the sister had called her, kept glancing at the empty plate, at the lamp burning beside it. She didn't ask again, but her eyes held the question. Silas didn't answer it. But for the first time and longer than he could remember, the silence at his table didn't feel like death. It felt like waiting. By morning, the snow had buried the road, and Silas told himself he was only keeping them because they couldn't leave, not because he couldn't bear to watch them go. He woke before dawn, the way he always did. The fire had burned low, and the two girls were still curled on the rug where he'd left them, the younger one tucked against her sister's chest like a kitten, seeking warmth. He watched them for his moment from his chair. He'd slept there, hadn't meant to, but his body had decided for him, and something in his chest tightened at the sight. Don't. He stood, quiet, moved to the stove, and started the morning's work. Coffee first, then biscuits, then bacon from the smokehouse. The familiar rhythm of it steadied him. This he knew, this he could do. The smell woke them. The little one stirred first. Nettie, he remembered, her nose twitching like a rabbit's. She sat up slowly, blinking at the room, at the fire he'd rebuilt without waking them, at him standing by the stove with flour on his hands. You make biscuits? Somebody's gotta. She smiled. A real one, unguarded, the kind children give before they learn not to. It hit him harder than he expected. The older girl, Eliza, woke with a start, her hands shooting out to find her sister. When she felt Nettie beside her, she relaxed. Then she saw Silas, and the wariness returned. Not fear exactly, calculation. She was measuring him again, the way she'd done last night. Smart girl. Don't trust easy. There's water in the basin, he said, not looking at her. Wash up. Breakfast in 10 minutes. They ate like they hadn't seen food in days. Probably hadn't. Silas watched them from the corner of his eye. The way Eliza cut her biscuit into precise halves. The way Nettie stuffed hers whole into her mouth and then looked guilty about it. He refilled their plates without asking. Thank you, Eliza said. Formal, stiff. The voice of someone trained to be grateful, whether she felt it or not. Nettie looked up at him, cheeks bulging. These are good. Don't talk with your mouth full. She swallowed. These are good, she said again, clearer now, and grinned. Something flickered at the corner of his mouth. He killed it before it could become a smile. Snow's deep, he said, turning to the window. Road won't clear for a day or two, maybe more. Eliza's hands stilled on her plate. We can leave as soon as... Didn't say you had to leave. The words came out rougher than he intended. He softened, barely. Said the road won't clear. You stay till it does. Work for your keep. Work? Eliza straightened. I can work. I'm good at cleaning. And mending. And I can cook some, if you show me where things are. I'll find you something. He stood, took his plate to the basin, kept his back to them so they wouldn't see his face, the way his jaw was tight, the way his hands weren't quite steady. 2 days, maybe 3, then they go. That was the deal he made with himself. That was the lie he needed to believe. The day passed in small negotiations. Silas gave them tasks, stacking firewood, sweeping the floors, sorting dried beans, and Eliza threw herself into each one like her life depended on it, which maybe it did. He understood that kind of work, the kind that says I'm worth keeping. Don't send me away. Nettie was different. She wandered, touched things, asked questions that had no safe answers. Why's this room locked? She stood at the end of the hall, small hand on the door he hadn't opened in 7 years. Silas's voice came out flat. Because it is. But... Nettie. Eliza appeared behind her sister, took her hand, pulled her away. Leave it alone. The girl went, but she looked back over her shoulder at the door, and Silas saw the question she didn't ask sitting plain on her face. Whose room? What happened? He turned away. Later, a moment he didn't expect. Nettie had found the woodpile by the back door and decided she was going to help. She grabbed a log nearly as big as her torso and tried to carry it to the stack by the fireplace. 3 steps in, she dropped it. It clattered against the floor, rolled under the table. Silas looked up from the harness he was mending. Nettie froze, waiting for the yell. You're smaller than the wood, he said. She blinked. What? The wood. It's bigger than you. He set down the harness. Try the kindling. Over there, the small pieces. She stared at him. Then a laugh broke out of her, sudden, startled, like she'd surprised herself with the sound. Eliza appeared in this doorway, dish towel in hand, face tight with worry. She'd heard the clatter, expected the worst, but there was nothing to see. Just Silas pointing at the kindling pile, and Nettie trotting over to it, still giggling. She's not in trouble, Silas said, without looking up. Eliza didn't answer, but he felt her watching him differently now, less like a threat, more like a riddle. Evening came slow, the way it does when snow presses against the windows and the world outside disappears. Silas set the table for dinner, 2 plates for himself, and... He stopped. The girls were in the other room. He could hear Nettie humming, some tuneless song she'd probably learned from her mother. Eliza's quieter voice, correcting her on something. His hand hovered over the cabinet where he kept Annabelle's plate. The same plate he'd set every night for 7 years. White ceramic, a small chip on the rim from when she'd dropped it as a child. He'd yelled at her for that. Stupid. Such a stupid thing to yell about. He took out the plate, set it in its usual place, but his hand was shaking. They ate in the glow of the oil lamp, the fire crackling low, wind moaning outside like something lost. Silas had made stew again, venison this time, with potatoes from the root cellar and wild onions he'd dried last summer. The girls ate slower tonight, not starving anymore, just hungry. Nettie's eyes kept drifting to the empty plate. "You can ask," Silas said quietly. He didn't know why he said it. Eliza shot her sister a warning look, but Nettie was already leaning forward. What was her name? The lamp flickered. Shadows jumped on the walls. Silas set down his spoon, looked at the plate, at the chip on the rim. Annabelle? The name fell into the room like a stone, into still water. He hadn't said it aloud, and he couldn't remember. Years, maybe since the funeral, when the preacher spoke it, and he'd wanted to tear the word out of the man's mouth because he didn't know her, didn't have the right. "That's pretty," Nettie said. "Was she nice?" Was she nice? Such a simple question. Children ask simple questions. Yeah. His voice came out rough. "Yeah, she was nice." Eliza was very still. She was looking at Silas the way someone looks at a wound they recognize. A mirror. "We should clean up," she said softly, and started gathering plates. Silas led her. That night, after the girls had fallen asleep by the fire, Silas sat at the table alone. The lamp still burned. Annabelle's plate was still there, but he'd moved it closer to the center. Not much, just an inch or two. Enough that it wasn't staring at him from across an empty distance. He didn't know what that meant. He got up to check the fire, and as he passed the chair where he'd draped his coat, he noticed the sleeve. The right one. There was a tear in it, small, barely noticeable, that he didn't remember. He looked at Eliza, asleep on the rug with Nettie curled against her. The tear was mended, neat, careful stitches, thread that matched close enough. She'd fixed it while he wasn't looking. Hadn't said a word. Silas stood there for a long moment, looking at the stitches, at the sleeping girls, at the lamp burning steady on the table. Then he put another log on the fire and sat in his chair and watched them until he fell asleep. 3 days in, and Silas caught himself listening for their footsteps, then hated himself for how much the silence would hurt when they left. The snow had stopped falling, but it lay thick across the valley, blue-white under a sky that couldn't decide between sun and cloud. The road to town was passable now. Had been since yesterday. Silas hadn't mentioned it. Neither had they. Evening. The lamp. Silas struck a match, touched it to the wick, and watched the flame catch. The brass base glowed warm in his hands, the dent on the left side smooth under his thumb, worn from years of this same motion. "That lamp's pretty." He turned. Nettie stood in the doorway, nightgown too big for her. One of Annabelle's, though he hadn't told her that. Eliza had found it in the cedar chest, and he'd said nothing when she'd put it on her sister. Easier than explaining. "It's old," he said. "Old things can be pretty." She patted closer, bare feet on the wood floor. "Did Annabelle like it?" His hand stilled on the glass chimney. "She knocked it over once, when she was about your age." The words came before he could stop them. "Dented the base." "See?" He tilted the lamp so she could see the mark. Nettie leaned in, studying it with the seriousness children give to small mysteries. "Did you get mad?" "Yes," I yelled. She cried. I told her to be more careful, that things cost money, that she needed to think before she acted. She was 8 years old, and I yelled at her over a dent in a lamp. "No," he said. "I didn't get mad." Nettie nodded, satisfied with the lie. "That's good. Mama used to get mad when I broke things. But then she'd hug me after and say sorry." She looked up at him. "Did you hug Annabelle after?" Silas set the lamp down, carefully, like it might shatter. "Go on to bed." Well, she went, but she touched the dent on her way past. Gentle, the way you touch something sacred. Later that night, Silas found Eliza in the kitchen. She had a rag and a tin of polish, and she was working on something at the table. Movements slow and deliberate. The lamp. She looked up when she heard him, hands freezing. I just thought, it's fine. The glass was smudged. From the smoke, I thought I'd clean it. He looked at her hands. Red from cold, roughened by work, but careful, precise. She held the lamp the way you hold something that belongs to someone else's grief. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know." She went back to polishing. He stood there, not knowing what to do with the feeling in his chest, something cracking open that he'd spent 7 years sealing shut. "She used to polish it," he said finally. "Annabelle, every Sunday." Said the light looked cleaner when the glass was clear. Eliza's hands slowed but didn't stop. "She sounds like she was good at taking care of things." "She was." His voice caught. "Better than me." Eliza didn't look up, but she said quiet, I don't think that's true. He didn't answer, just stood there in the doorway, watching a stranger's daughter tend to his dead daughter's lamp, and felt something he hadn't felt in 7 years. Hope. Faint as a match flame, dangerous as kerosene. The next morning, James Running Bear came by. Silas saw the horse coming up the ridge before dawn. The paint mare Running Bear had traded for 3 years back, her breath steaming in the early cold. He put coffee on and waited on the porch, the way he always did. The way they'd done for 15 years. Since Running Bear's people had been pushed onto the reservation land that bordered Silas's eastern fence, Running Bear dismounted slow. He was 63 now, joints stiff in the cold, but he moved with the same economy he always had. No wasted motion, no unnecessary words. "Coffee's on," Silas said. "Good." They went inside. Running Bear stopped 3 steps past the threshold. The girls were at the table, Eliza helping Nettie with her letters, scratching them into a piece of slate Silas had found in the barn. They looked up at the stranger, and Nettie's hand found her sister's under the table. Running Bear looked at them, then at Silas, one eyebrow raised. "They're staying," Silas said, "till the snow clears." "Snow cleared yesterday." Silas didn't answer. Running Bear walked to the table, lowered himself into a chair across from the girls with the gravity of a man who'd learned to make every movement count. He looked at Nettie's slate. "Your letters are good," he said. "Better than my grandson's were." Nettie's fear melted. "You have a grandson?" "Had. The government took him. Sent him east to learn to be white." He said it without bitterness, which made it worse. "He writes to me sometimes. His letters are full of English words I have to ask the trader to read." Eliza's hand tightened on her sister's. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. Running Bear looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded. "You know what it is to lose family." It wasn't a question. Silas brought the coffee, set a cup in front of Running Bear, another at his own place. The girls had gone back to their letters, but quieter now, listening. Running Bear sipped, said nothing for a long while. This was their way, the silence that came before words, the patience that settlers had never learned. Finally, "You are different." Silas stiffened. "How's that?" "Less dead." He didn't know how to answer that, didn't try. Running Bear looked at the table, at the empty plate, still in its place near the lamp. "You still set the plate." "Yeah, but you moved it." Silas's hand tightened around his cup. He had moved it, just a few inches. He hadn't thought anyone would notice. "The dead don't eat," Running Bear said, "but the living do, and you have living mouths at your table now." From the corner, Nettie's voice. "Is he talking about us?" "Hush," Eliza said, but she was watching the 2 men, reading the currents she couldn't name. Running Bear stood, slow, deliberate. He'd said what he came to say, maybe not all of it, but enough. He walked to the door, then stopped, looked back at Silas. "She was not yours to keep," he said. "Annabelle, none of our children are. We only walk beside them for a while." He glanced at the girls. "These 2 are walking now. The question is whether you will walk with them or let them pass." He left. The sound of his horse's hooves faded into the snow. Silas sat with the words. They sat with him. That afternoon, Eliza found him in the barn, mending a bridle that didn't need mending. "Can I ask you something?" He didn't look up. "Depends." She leaned against the stall door, arms crossed. Protective. The way she held herself when she was about to ask something that scared her. "You built this ranch yourself?" "Most of it. It's big, real big." She paused. "You built it for your family?" His hands stilled on the leather. "That was the idea. What happened to them?" The question landed soft, but it cut deep. He thought about lying. Thought about telling her it was none of her business. Thought about all the ways he'd dodged this question for 7 years. "My wife died when Annabelle was 3, he said. "Fever, same thing that—" He stopped, started again. "I raised her alone after that. Thought I was doing right. Building something for her, a legacy. But I was building it for me, telling myself it was for her, when really I just—" He set down the bridle. "I didn't know how to be soft. Didn't know how to say the things she needed to hear, so I built fences and barns and told myself that was love." Eliza was quiet. When she spoke, her voice was smaller than he'd heard it. "My mother was sick for a long time. I tried to take care of her. Thought if I did everything right, she'd get better." A pause. "She didn't." Silas looked at her, really looked, and saw what he'd missed before. Not just a girl carrying her sister, but a girl carrying a guilt she'd never named. "That wasn't your fault," he said. "Wasn't yours either." They stood there in the cold barn, breath fogging between them, and something passed that neither of them could have spoken aloud. Recognition. The terrible comfort of meeting someone who'd failed the same way you had. Snow's clearing, Eliza said finally. The road to town's probably open by now. Probably. We should go, before we're more trouble than we're worth. Silas picked up the bridle, turned it over in his hands. Supper's at 6, he said. Don't be late. He didn't look at her. Didn't have to. He heard her exhale, shaky, like she'd been holding her breath for days, and then her footsteps retreating through the barn door. When she was gone, he set down the bridle. His hands were trembling. That night, Silas checked on them before bed. The fire was low. The girls curled together under the quilt he'd given them. Another one of Annabelle's. Pulled from the chest he hadn't opened in years, Nettie was asleep. But Eliza's eyes were open, watching the flames. You should sleep, he said from the doorway. I know. He turned to go. Mr. Cray, he stopped. Thank you, she said, for letting us stay. He didn't know what to say. The words you're welcome felt too small. Don't mention it too dismissive. Get some rest, he said. Plenty of work tomorrow. He went to his chair, sat in the dark, listening to the fire settle, the wind push against the windows, the soft sound of Eliza's breathing as she finally let herself sleep. On the table, the lamp burned low. The empty plate caught the light. But tonight, for the first time, Silas wasn't looking at it. He was looking at the door where the girls slept. Silas found the ribbon hidden in Eliza's coat pocket, blue silk, the kind they sold at the general store in town, and something in him went cold, the way it had the night Annabelle walked out. He hadn't meant to find it. He'd been hanging the coats by the door to dry after the girls came in from the snow, and his hand had brushed something in the lining. Instinct made him pull it out. 7 years of living alone had made him suspicious of hidden things. The ribbon lay across his palm, fine silk, the kind that cost real money, the kind a girl with nothing shouldn't have. His mind went to the only place it knew how to go. She stole it. Eliza was in the kitchen, helping Nettie dry the breakfast dishes. She turned when she heard his boots on the floor, and her face went white when she saw what was in his hand. Where'd you get this? His voice came out flat, the voice he'd used with ranch hands who lied to him, the voice he'd used with Annabelle the night she left. Don't lie to me. Nettie shrank back against her sister. She'd heard that tone before, from other men, in other places. None of those memories were good. Eliza's chin came up, defiant, but her hands were shaking. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. He stepped closer. Tell me you didn't take it from someone, from a store, a house. I didn't steal it. Then where'd it come from? Girls like you don't have silk ribbons. Girls like you don't have anything unless... He stopped. The words hung in the air between them, ugly and sharp. Girls like you. He saw Eliza flinch, saw the armor go up, the same armor she'd worn that first night, when she'd stood on his porch and said, "We don't need charity. We'll go." She grabbed Nettie's hand, started for the door. Eliza, Nettie's voice was thin with fear, but it's snowing. Eliza, it's snowing outside. I know. She kept walking. Nettie stumbled, trying to keep up, looking back at Silas with eyes that didn't understand. He stood frozen, watching them go, the same way he'd watched Annabelle go. You're doing it again. The thought broke through the ice in his chest. You're letting her walk out. You're letting them both walk out, because you're too proud to be wrong. Wait. Eliza didn't stop. He moved, faster than he'd moved in years, caught up to them at the door, put his hand on the frame before she could pull it open. Wait, please. The word felt like glass in his mouth. He couldn't remember the last time he'd said it. Eliza turned. Her eyes were wet, but her face was stone. You want to know where I got it? Her voice cracked. I got it from my mother's hair, the day she died. It was the only thing I could take, the only thing I have left of her. Silas's hand dropped from the door. I kept it hidden because people take things from orphans. Because every place we've stayed, someone's gone through our things. Someone's always looking for a reason to call us thieves, to throw us out, to... She stopped, breathing hard. Nettie was crying now, silent tears running down her face. I've never stolen anything in my life, Eliza said. Except... The word hung there. Except what? She looked at him, and in that moment he saw it, the same weight he carried, the same guilt she'd been hiding behind duty and work and keeping her sister alive. Nothing. She pulled Nettie closer. Forget it. But Silas had heard the catch in her voice. The way the word accept had torn out of her like a confession she hadn't meant to make. There's something else. Something she did. Something she thinks is unforgivable. He looked down at the ribbon in his hand. Blue silk, the color of grief, the color of a daughter's memory. Not evidence of crime, evidence of love, and he'd treated it like proof of everything he feared. The silence stretched. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind picked up, that low moan through the eaves that meant more snow was coming. Silas held out the ribbon. I'm sorry. 2 words. They cost him more than she'd ever know. Eliza stared at him, then at the ribbon. Her hand trembled as she took it back. You thought I was a thief. I thought, he stopped. What had he thought? That she was Annabelle, that history was repeating and he had to stop it before it destroyed him again? I don't know what I thought. I was wrong. You were. No forgiveness in her voice. Not yet, maybe not ever. She tucked the ribbon back into her pocket, the same hiding place, because where else was safe, and walked back to the kitchen. Nettie followed, glancing back at Silas once with eyes that held something new. Doubt. That night, they ate in silence. Silas served the stew. The girls ate. No one spoke. The empty plate sat in its place and the lamp burned steady, but the warmth that had been building for 3 days was gone. He'd broken something. He didn't know if it could be fixed. After dinner, Eliza took Nettie to their corner by the fire. She didn't look at Silas, didn't say goodnight. He sat at the table alone, staring at the lamp. Except, the word kept turning in his mind, I've never stolen anything. Except, what had she stolen? And why did she carry it like a wound that wouldn't heal? He thought of Annabelle, of the letter she'd written. Forgive me, Papa. She'd asked for forgiveness. He'd never given it. Never had the chance. Don't make the same mistake. He looked at the girls by the fire. Eliza's back was to him, her body curved around her sister like a shield, protecting Nettie from the cold, from the world, from him. She's not a thief. She's a child who loved her mother enough to keep a piece of her. And whatever else she'd done, whatever except meant, it was eating her alive, the same way Annabelle's letter had eaten him. Silas stood, walked to the window, looked out at the snow falling through the darkness. Tomorrow he would ask. Tomorrow he would listen. Tonight, he stood watch over 2 girls who didn't trust him anymore, and wondered if this was what grace felt like. Not the receiving, but the chance to give it, even when you didn't deserve to. That night, Eliza told him the truth about their mother, and Silas understood, finally, why he'd been so quick to accuse her. He saw his own sin in her eyes. The fire had burned low. Nettie was asleep, curled under the quilt by the hearth, her breath slow and even. But Eliza sat apart, knees drawn to her chest, staring at the embers like they held answers she couldn't find. Silas watched her from his chair. The distance between them felt wider than the room. He should go to bed. Should let the silence do what silence does, harden into habit, into the kind of cold that becomes comfortable, because at least it's familiar. That's what he'd done for 7 years. That's what he knew how to do. But Running Bear's voice was in his head. The dead don't eat, but the living do. He stood, crossed the room, sat on the floor across from her, not close, but closer than he'd been all evening. Eliza didn't look up. You don't have to tell me, he said, what you started to say earlier, about the accept. I know. The fire popped. A log shifted, sending up a small spray of sparks. But I want to know, he kept his voice low, careful, the way you speak to something wounded, if you want to tell me. She was quiet for a long time, long enough that he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, Mama was sick for almost a year, coughing sickness, the kind that doesn't get better. She picked at a thread on the quilt. We didn't have money for a doctor. We barely had money for food. But there was a man in town, a doctor, who had medicine, real medicine, the kind that helps. Silas waited. I watched his office for 3 days. Learned when he left, when his wife went to market, when the door was unlocked. Her voice was flat now. The voice of someone reciting a confession they'd rehearsed in their own head 1,000 times. I went in through the back, took a bottle of the medicine, got out clean. She finally looked at him. Her eyes were dry, but there was something shattered behind them. I got caught anyway, not by him, by his neighbor. She saw me leaving, told the sheriff. Word got around. What happened? What always happens. A bitter laugh. Too old for her years. They said we weren't welcome anymore. Said they couldn't have a thief in their town, around their children. We had to leave. She turned back to the fire. It was the middle of January, snow on the ground. Mama could barely walk, but we couldn't stay, so we walked. 2 days, 3, I don't remember anymore. And her voice cracked. She died on the road 2 days after we left. Froze to death in a barn outside of Helena, while Nettie and I slept next to her, trying to keep her warm. The words hung in the air, heavy as stone. So yes, she looked at Silas again, and now there were tears, not falling, just there, held back by sheer will. I'm a thief. I stole medicine to save my mother, and she died anyway, and it was my fault. Silas didn't speak. He couldn't. The story sat in his chest like a shard of glass, cutting deeper with every breath, because he knew this story. He knew the shape of it, the weight of it, the way it wrapped around your bones and wouldn't let go. I tried to save her. She died anyway. It was my fault. He'd told himself the same words every night, For 7 years. Eliza wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Quick, angry at herself for crying. You wanted to know, now you know. She stood. We'll leave in the morning, when the snow clears. Sit down. She froze. Please. His voice came out rough. Sit down. She sat. Not because she trusted him, but because she was too tired to fight. Silas stared at the fire. The words were somewhere inside him. The words he'd never said. The story he'd never told. He could feel them pressing against his throat like water against a dam. Tell her. Tell her you know what it's like to carry a death you didn't cause but can't stop blaming yourself for. He opened his mouth. She died of fever. Eliza looked up. Annabelle, my daughter. He couldn't meet her eyes. Couldn't look at anything but the flames. She died of fever in Butte. 3 weeks after she left home. The silence was absolute. Even the wind seemed to stop. She left because of me. The words tore out of him, jagged and raw. I was cold, hard. Spent all my time building this place. Building something I could leave her, and I never... He stopped. Breathed, started again. I never told her I loved her, not the way she needed, not in words. I thought the work was enough. The ranch, the security. I thought she'd understand. He laughed. A broken sound. She didn't understand. How could she? I never explained. I just expected her to know. Eliza was watching him now, not with suspicion, with something worse, recognition. What happened? She asked. Quiet. The way you ask when you already know the answer will hurt. Silas's hands gripped his knees, knuckles white. She was 16 when she left. We'd had a fight. I don't even remember what about. Something small, something stupid. She said I didn't see her. Said I looked right through her like she was just another fence post on this goddamn ranch. He closed his eyes. She was right. The fire crackled. Somewhere outside, the wind moaned through the eaves, that low, mournful sound that made the house feel like a ship lost at sea. I let her go. Told myself she'd come back when she'd cooled off. Told myself she was just being dramatic, the way young girls get. Told myself. His voice broke. I told myself a lot of things, none of them true. He opened his eyes, stared at the flames. She went to Butte, got work at a boarding house. I found out later she'd been sick for a week before anyone thought to send word. By the time the letter reached me, she was already in the ground. Eliza made a small sound. Not a word, just a breath, punched out of her. I never got to see her, never got to say. He couldn't finish. The words stuck in his throat like splinters. I'm sorry, I love you, I was wrong. All the things he should have said, all the things she'd needed to hear. Buried with her in a cemetery he'd only visited once because he couldn't stand to go back. She wrote me a letter, he said, before she died. I got it after. He reached into his shirt pocket, pulled out a piece of paper, folded so many times the creases had worn soft as cloth. He didn't open it. Didn't need to. He knew every word by heart. Forgive me, Papa. His voice was barely a whisper. That's what she wrote. Forgive me. Like she was the one who'd done something wrong. He finally looked at Eliza, tears on his face now, the first he'd shed in years, maybe ever, in front of another person. She didn't need forgiving. I did, and I never got the chance to tell her. The fire had burned down to coals. The room was darker now, shadows pooling in the corners, the lamp on the table casting its small circle of light like a vigil flame. Eliza sat very still. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. I never said sorry to Mama either, she said. I was so sure I could save her. So sure that if I just got the medicine, if I just tried hard enough. Her voice splintered. She told me not to. Before I went to the doctor's office, she said it wasn't worth the risk. She said she'd rather die than see me get in trouble. She wrapped her arms around herself. I didn't listen. I thought I knew better. You thought you could fix it. Silas's voice was raw but steady. You thought if you loved her enough, if you tried hard enough, you could keep her alive. Eliza nodded. Couldn't speak. That ain't a sin, Silas said. That's just being a child who loves her mother. Then why does it feel like one? The question hung between them, heavy as stone, old as grief. Silas didn't have an answer. He'd been asking himself the same question for 7 years, but he said the only thing he could think to say, the thing he wished someone had said to him all those nights alone at this table, staring at an empty plate. Because we think love should be enough to save people, and when it isn't, we blame ourselves for not loving harder. Eliza looked at him, and for the first time since he'd found the ribbon, her eyes held something other than suspicion or hurt, understanding. You were trying to save her, Silas said. That ain't something to apologize for. You were trying to build her a future, Eliza said. That ain't something to apologize for either. They sat there in the dying light of the fire, two people who'd been drowning in the same water, finally finding something to hold on to. Silas stood. His knees ached. He was getting old, older than he'd ever expected to be, but the pain felt distant, unimportant. He crossed to the table, stood over the empty plate, the lamp, the place he'd kept set for 7 years. Eliza watched him. "I've been sitting at this table every night," he said, waiting for her to come back, setting her place like she might just walk through that door. He touched the plate. The chip on the rim, like if I kept the ritual going, it'd undo what I did. "Does it help?" "No." He almost laughed. "No, it doesn't help, but I didn't know what else to do." He looked at her, at Nettie, still sleeping by the fire, innocent of all the grief the adults carried. "Running Bear told me something. He said I can't keep her. Annabelle said children aren't ours to keep. We just walk beside them for a while." Eliza nodded slowly. "That sounds right." "Maybe." Silas looked back at the plate. But I think he was also saying something else. That walking beside someone means being there, being present, not just building fences and calling it love. He turned to face her fully. "I wasn't there for Annabelle. I can't change that. But I can." He stopped. The words felt too big, too dangerous. "You can what?" Eliza asked. Silas looked at her, at this girl who'd stolen medicine for her dying mother and carried the guilt like a stone around her neck. At her sister, who still believed in angels and asked questions no one could answer. "I can be here now," he said, "for whoever needs me to be." Eliza's breath caught. She didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Outside, the wind had gone quiet. The snow fell soft and steady, covering the world in white. And in the small circle of lamplight, two people, who'd thought they were beyond saving, sat with their grief and let it be seen, and found that the sharing made it lighter. Not healed, not yet, but lighter. Silas stood on the porch at dawn, watching the snow erase everything, and wondered if a man could be forgiven by someone who was already dead. The cold bit at his face, his hands, the parts of him he'd left uncovered. He didn't mind. There was something clean about it, the way the frost stripped everything down to what was essential. Bone and breath, blood and silence. Behind him, the house was still. The girls hadn't stirred yet. Last night's confessions hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear, and he'd needed to get out, to breathe something that didn't taste like grief. The valley spread out below him, white and endless. The Bitterroot Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks sharp against a sky just starting to blush with pink. Beautiful country. He'd built his life here, carved something out of nothing. And for what? For her, for Annabelle. For a future she never got to live. He heard the crunch of snow before he saw the horse. Running Bear's paint mare crested the ridge, moving slow and steady through the drifts. The old man rode the way he did everything, without hurry, without waste. Silas didn't move from the porch, just waited. Running Bear dismounted, tied the mare to the post, climbed the steps. He stood beside Silas, looking out at the same mountains, the same snow, the same silence. Neither spoke for a long time. Then Running Bear said, "You told them." "Yeah." "And they told you." "Yeah." Running Bear nodded, his breath fogged in the cold air, mingling with Silas's. "My grandson was sent to the school when he was 8, Running Bear said, not looking at Silas, looking at the mountains. They cut his hair, took his name, told him the words he'd spoken since birth were the words of animals. Silas waited. I tried to stop them, rode to the agency, spoke to the men in suits. They had papers, laws. They said it was for his own good. And a long pause. I have not seen him in 6 years. He writes sometimes. His letters are in English, proper English. He signs them with the name they gave him, Thomas. What was his real name? Ku say. The Salish word sounded like water over stones. It means little owl, because when he was born, he didn't cry. He just looked around with big eyes, watching everything. Running Bear finally turned to face Silas. I tell you this not for pity. I tell you because I know what it is to lose a child who is still alive. And I know what it is to lose one who is dead. He paused. The wound is the same, the wondering, the questions that have no answers. Silas's jaw tightened. How do you live with it? I don't know. Running Bear's voice was quiet, honest. Some days I pray, some days I curse, some days I do both, as he looked back at the mountains. But I have learned one thing. Holding on to grief does not keep them close. It only keeps you far from everyone else. Running Bear left an hour later, the sound of his mare's hooves fading into the white. Silas stayed on the porch until his fingers were numb. Then he went inside, past the sleeping girls, past the table with its empty plate, to the end of the hallway. Annabelle's door. He'd stood here 1,000 times in 7 years. Hand raised to the knob, heart hammering, unable to turn it, The room was a tomb, a shrine. Opening it would mean admitting she was really gone, that the girl who'd laughed and slammed this door and filled these walls with life was never coming back. His hand touched the wood, cold, smooth. You let her go once. You gonna do it again? He thought of Eliza's face last night, the way she'd looked at him when he said, I can be here now, like she wanted to believe him but didn't dare. He thought of Nettie, sleeping by the fire, trusting him even after he'd almost thrown them out. He thought of Running Bear's grandson, somewhere in a brick building back east, learning to forget who he was. You can't save Annabelle, you can't bring her back, but you can stop using her room as a prison. He turned the knob. The door opened with a creak, hinges stiff from years of disuse. The air inside was cold and still, thick with dust and the faint ghost of lavender, her scent. She'd kept dried flowers in a jar by the window. Silas stepped inside. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. The bed, still made with the quilt her mother had sewn before she died. The book on the nightstand, spine cracked, pages yellow. She'd been halfway through when she left and never finished. The hairbrush on the dresser, still holding strands of dark hair. He moved through the room slowly, touching things. The brush, the quilt. The jar of dried lavender, the flowers crumbling now. Petals like paper. On the wall above her bed, a sampler she'd stitched when she was 10, crooked letters, uneven stitches. Home is where the heart is. He'd told her to fix the mistakes. Make it neater, do it right. She never had. That's what you remember, out of everything. That's what comes back, telling a 10-year-old her needlework wasn't good enough. He sat on the bed. The mattress sagged under his weight, the frame groaning softly. This was where she'd slept, where she'd dreamed, where she'd lain awake at night, probably wondering why her father was so hard to please. I'm sorry. The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. I'm sorry I didn't say it when you were alive. I'm sorry I let you walk out that door. I'm sorry I spent so much time building walls and fences that I forgot to build a home. His voice cracked. I'm sorry I made you think you had to apologize to me. You didn't. You never did. He pulled out the letter, unfolded it for the first time in years, her handwriting shaky. She'd been sick when she wrote it. Papa, I know you're angry. I know I shouldn't have left the way I did. But I couldn't stay anymore. I couldn't keep being invisible in my own house. I don't hate you. I want you to know that. I never hated you. I just wanted you to see me. Maybe one day when I've made something of myself, you'll be proud. Maybe then you'll understand why I had to go. Forgive me, Papa, for not being strong enough to stay. Your daughter, Annabelle Silas, read the letter once, twice. Then he folded it carefully and pressed it to his chest. I saw you, he whispered. I always saw you. I just didn't know how to show it. The room was silent. The dust motes drifted in the pale light from the window. He didn't know how long he sat there. Long enough for the sun to climb higher, for the shadows to shift, for the cold to seep into his bones. When he finally stood, something had changed, not healed, not fixed, but shifted, like a bone finally settling back into place after years of being wrong. He looked at the room one last time, the bed, the book, the sampler with its crooked letters. Home is where the heart is. He'd thought his heart died with Annabelle, but maybe it had just been waiting for someone to remind him it was still beating. He left the door open when he walked out. The carriage came up the road just past noon. Hiram Pollard, in his black coat, 2 county men behind him, and Silas knew this was the moment he'd been waiting 7 years to get right. He saw them from the window while he was washing the breakfast dishes, a dark shape against the white, moving slow and deliberate up the ridge. The horses were fresh, their breath steaming, and the carriage wheels cut clean lines through the snow. Official, purposeful, the kind of arrival that meant trouble. Girls, Eliza looked up from the table, where she'd been teaching Nettie her letters again. Something in his voice made her freeze. Someone's coming. She was at the window in 3 steps. Her face went pale. That's the county seal, she said. On the carriage. I know what it is. Nettie appeared at her sister's elbow. Who is it? Eliza pulled her back from the window. Protective. Automatic. Nobody. It's somebody, Silas said. And I'm going to handle it. He looked at Eliza, held her gaze. Stay inside. Both of you. Don't come out unless I call for you. Mr. Cray, Eliza. His voice was firm, but not hard. Trust me. She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for something, a lie, a weakness, a sign that he'd fold the way everyone else had folded when officials came knocking. Whatever she found, it was enough. She nodded. Silas grabbed his coat, stepped out onto the porch, closed the door behind him. The carriage stopped at the edge of the yard. Pollard climbed down first. Tall, thin, his black coat buttoned to the throat despite the cold. His face had the pinched look of a man who'd spent his life disapproving of things and had gotten comfortable with it. The 2 county men stayed on their horses. Younger, broader, the kind of men who did what they were told and didn't ask questions. Silas. Pollard's voice carried across the snow. Pleasant, almost friendly. The tone of a man who believed he was doing God's work. Hiram. Pollard crossed the yard with careful steps, avoiding the deeper drifts, preserving his polished boots. He stopped at the foot of the porch steps and looked up at Silas with an expression of practiced concern. Cold day to be standing outside. I've had colder. I imagine you have. Pollard glanced at the house, at the windows. We've had word, Silas, about some children. 2 girls, orphans apparently. Word is they've been staying with you. Word travels fast. It does when people are concerned. Pollard's smile didn't reach his eyes. An unmarried man, living alone, taking in young girls. Surely you understand how that looks. Silas felt his jaw tighten. I understand how small minds work, if that's what you mean. The smile flickered, hardened. These children are wards of the territory, Silas. They need to be in the proper institution. The orphanage in Helena is equipped to care for them. Schooling, Christian instruction, eventual placement with suitable families. They're fine where they are. That's not for you to decide. Pollard's voice lost its warmth. The law is clear. Orphaned children without living relatives must be remanded to territorial custody. You have no legal standing to keep them. Legal standing. Silas let the words sit in the air. That what you call it? I call it the law. And I call it men in offices deciding what happens to children they've never met. He stepped forward, not aggressive, just present, taking up space. Those girls walked 3 days through the snow to get here. They were half dead when they knocked on my door. I fed them, warmed them, gave them a place to sleep. And now you're telling me I've got no standing? Pollard's eyes narrowed. I'm telling you that your feelings don't supersede the legal framework of this territory. These girls need proper care. They have proper care. From you? Pollard laughed, short, dismissive. Silas, you've barely spoken to another human being in 7 years. You eat alone, work alone, live alone. You're not fit to raise children. You're barely fit to raise cattle. The words landed like a slap. And the worst part was, Silas knew they were true, or they had been true. A week ago, he wouldn't have argued. But that was before the knock on the door. Before Nettie asked about angels. Before Eliza mended his coat without being asked. Before he'd sat in the dark with a girl who carried the same guilt he did and realized that maybe he wasn't as dead as he'd thought. You're right, Silas said quietly. Pollard blinked. I'm sorry? You're right. I've been alone a long time. He stopped, breathed. I've been holding on to something that wasn't there. Setting a plate for a ghost, living like I was already buried. He looked Pollard in the eye. But I'm not dead yet, and neither are they. Pollard's expression shifted. The pleasant mask cracked, revealing something colder underneath. This isn't a negotiation, Silas. I have the authority to remove those children. If you interfere, I'll have you arrested for obstruction. Then arrest me. The words came out steady, calm, the voice of a man who'd already counted the cost and decided to pay it. Pollard stared at him. The 2 county men exchanged glances, uncertain. You'd go to jail for 2 orphans you've known a week? I'd go to jail for doing right by them. Silas stepped down off the porch, closer now, close enough to see the vein pulsing in Pollard's temple. I spent 7 years doing nothing, sitting in that house, eating alone, talking to ghosts. I let my daughter walk out the door because I was too proud to stop her, too cold to say what needed saying. His voice dropped. I'm not doing that again. Pollard's jaw worked. He wasn't used to being defied, not by ranchers, not by anyone in this valley. He was the bank, the church, the committee. He was order. You're making a mistake. Maybe. Silas shrugged. Wouldn't be my first. Movement at the door. Silas turned. Eliza stood on the threshold, Nettie behind her, clutching her sister's hand. I told you to stay inside. I know. Eliza's chin was up. That stubborn set to her jaw he'd come to recognize. But if he's going to take us, he should hear it from us. She walked past Silas, down the steps, stopped in front of Pollard, a girl of 11, facing a man with the weight of the territory behind him. We want to stay. Pollard looked down at her. Child, you don't understand. I understand fine. Her voice didn't waver. I've been taking care of my sister for 6 months. I've slept in barns and begged for food and buried my mother in a stranger's field because no one would help us. I know what we need. She glanced back at Silas, then at Pollard. And it's not a county orphanage. Nettie stepped forward, still holding her sister's hand. She looked up at Pollard with those wide eyes, the eyes that had asked about angels, that had seen the empty plate and understood something adults couldn't name. He's not mean, she said. He's just sad, but he's getting better. Silas felt something break open in his chest. Not pain this time. Something else. Something that felt terrifyingly like hope. Pollard stood rigid. His face had gone red, the careful composure crumbling. This is highly irregular. You're children. You don't get to decide. They just did. Silas stepped forward, putting himself between Pollard and the girls. Not threatening, just present, a wall. And so did I. He looked at the county men on their horses. They hadn't moved, hadn't reached for anything. They were watching with the uncertain expressions of men who'd signed up for an easy job and found something else entirely. You want to drag 2 little girls out of here in the snow? Silas asked them. In front of God and everybody, because a paper says you can? One of them looked away. The other shifted in his saddle. Pollard's voice was tight. This isn't over. Maybe not. Silas nodded. You do what you need to do. File your papers, talk to your judges. But right now, today, those girls are staying here. And you're leaving. A long moment. The wind picked up, swirling snow between them. Then Pollard turned, walked back to his carriage. The county men followed, relief plain on their faces. At the carriage door, Pollard paused, looked back. You're not their father, Silas. You never will be. Silas felt Nettie's hand slip into his, small, cold, trusting. No, he said, but I'm choosing to be. The carriage pulled away. The horses' hooves crunched through the snow, fading into the white until there was nothing left but silence. They stood there, the 3 of them, watching the empty road. Eliza spoke first. He'll come back. Probably. What happens then? Silas looked down at her, at Nettie, still holding his hand. Then we figure it out. Together. Nettie tugged at his fingers. Does this mean we can stay? He knelt in the snow, eye level with her now. The small girl who'd asked about angels and seen him clearer than he'd seen himself in years. Yeah, he said. It means you can stay. She threw her arms around his neck. He stiffened, instinct, old habit, then let himself soften, let himself hold her back. Over her shoulder he saw Eliza watching. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. Just barely. The first real smile he'd seen from her. Thank you, she said quietly. Silas shook his head. Don't thank me yet. I don't know what I'm doing. Neither do we. She almost laughed. Maybe we'll figure it out together. He stood. Nettie's hand found his again, natural as breathing. Come on, he said. It's cold. Let's go inside. They walked up the steps, through the door, into the warmth. Behind them, the snow kept falling, soft and steady, covering the tracks of the carriage, covering everything, starting clean. Thanksgiving morning broke quiet over the Bitterroot, and for the first time in 7 years, Silas Cray set the table without shaking. The sun came up slow and golden, spilling through the frost-laced windows like honey, warming the floorboards where the girls had slept. The fire had burned low overnight, but he'd fed it before dawn, coaxing the flames back to life the way you coax something fragile. With patience, with care, with the understanding that warmth takes time. 3 plates, he set them out one by one. His place at the head, Eliza to his right, Nettie to his left. The empty plate, Annabelle's plate, with its chipped rim, was not on the table. He'd put it back into the cabinet this morning, wrapped it in cloth, placed it on the top shelf where he could still see it, still know it was there, but where it no longer sat in judgment over every meal. You're not gone, he thought, touching the cabinet door. I'm just learning to let you rest. The lamp stood in the center of the table, freshly polished. Eliza had done it again last night, without being asked, its brass base gleaming in the morning light. He lit it anyway, even though the sun was bright enough. Ritual mattered, but rituals could change, could grow. This one had. Nettie woke first. She came padding out in Annabelle's old nightgown, hair tangled from sleep, rubbing her eyes with small fists. She stopped at the edge of the kitchen and looked at the table. 3 plates, she said. That's right. 1 for you, 1 for Eliza, 1 for me. That's right. She tilted her head, studying the table with the seriousness of a child working through a puzzle. What about the angel plate? Silas's chest tightened. He knelt down, bringing himself to her level, something he'd learned to do this past week, something that still felt new but no longer felt wrong. The angel plate is resting, he said, up in the cabinet, where I can see it when I need to. Nettie considered this. Is Annabelle mad? No, sweetheart, I don't think she's mad. How do you know? He didn't know. Not for certain, but he knew what he believed now, what he'd come to believe in the quiet hours after Pollard's carriage had disappeared down the ridge. Because she'd wanted the table used, he said. She'd want people sitting here, eating, being a family. Nettie nodded slowly, then her face brightened. Wait here. She ran back to the corner where she and Eliza slept, rummaging through the small pile of belongings they'd accumulated. A hairbrush Silas had given them, a ribbon, a book of fairy tales he'd found in Annabelle's room and decided they should have. She came back holding something in her cupped hands, small, fragile, a wildflower. Dried and pressed, its petals faded to a pale purple, stem brittle as old paper. "I found it," she said. "Before the snow. I was going to give it to Eliza for her birthday, but—" She looked at the table, at the lamp, at the space where the empty plate used to be. "Can I put it here? For Annabelle?" Silas couldn't speak. His throat had closed around something. Not grief, not exactly. Something fuller. Something that ached in a different way. He nodded. Nettie placed the wildflower beside the lamp. Careful, reverent, the way you place something sacred. Then she stepped back and looked at it. "There," she said. "Now she knows we didn't forget her." Eliza appeared in the doorway. She'd been awake for a while. Silas had heard her stirring, but she'd stayed back, giving them space, watching, the way she always watched, reading situations before stepping into them. Now she came forward, her eyes moving from the table, to the flower, to her sister, to Silas. "Nettie," she said softly. "That's beautiful." "It's for the angel," Nettie said. "So she knows she's still invited, even if she can't eat." Eliza's eyes met Silas's, wet, bright. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. They made breakfast together. Silas worked the stove, bacon, eggs, biscuits with honey from the cellar, while Eliza set out the butter and jam and the good napkins he'd forgotten he owned. Nettie's job was to keep the fire fed, and she did it with fierce concentration, carrying kindling in armloads almost too big for her, the kitchen filled with warmth, with the smell of food, with the small sounds of people moving around each other, learning each other's rhythms. This is what it was supposed to be, Silas thought. This is what I built it for, not the house, not the ranch, not the fences and barns and acres of land. This, the table, the meal, the people sitting down together. They ate, not in silence this time. Nettie chattered about the snow, about the horses she wanted to meet, about whether chickens could learn their names. Eliza answered her sister's questions with the patient half-attention of someone who'd been doing it for years. Silas listened, adding a word here and there, surprised by how natural it felt. When the plates were nearly empty, Nettie looked up at him. "Cray? Yeah? Is this our home now?" The question landed soft, but it carried weight. The weight of 6 months on the road, the weight of barns and strangers and a mother buried in a field, the weight of every time someone had promised safety and failed to deliver. Silas set down his fork. "I don't know what's going to happen," he said honestly. "That man, Pollard, he'll probably come back. There'll be papers and lawyers and people telling us what we can and can't do." Nettie's face fell. "But—" He reached across the table, took her hand, then Eliza's. Both of them, small and cold and trusting in his rough grip. "But whatever happens, you've got a place here. Long as I'm breathing, you've got a place." "Promise?" Nettie whispered. "Promise." Eliza's hand tightened around his. She didn't speak, didn't need to. After breakfast, they cleared the table together, washed the dishes, put everything back in its place. The wildflower stayed beside the lamp. Silas stood at the window, looking out at the valley. The snow had stopped falling. The sky was clear, sharp blue, and the sun turned everything to diamonds. The fields, the fences, the mountains in the distance. Eliza came to stand beside him. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for what you did yesterday, standing up to him. Didn't do much, just stood there. That's not nothing." She paused. "Most people don't stand at all." He thought about that, about all the times he hadn't stood, hadn't spoken, hadn't done what needed doing because it was easier to stay silent. "I'm sorry," he said, "for what I said about the ribbon, for thinking—" "I know." She cut him off, gentle. "I forgave you already." When?" "When you opened her door." She looked at him. "That's when I knew you were different, that you weren't going to stay frozen." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing, just stood there with her, watching the light move across the snow. That evening, as the sun sank toward the mountains and the sky turned to fire, Silas sat at the table with a cup of coffee and watched the girls play by the hearth. Some game Nettie had invented, with rules that changed every minute, and Eliza pretending to lose so her sister could win. The lamp burned steady in the center of the table. The wildflower caught the light, its faded petals glowing amber. He thought about Annabelle, about the letter, about all the words he'd never said, and the years he'd wasted saying nothing. "I kept a chair for a ghost. Turns out she sent me someone to fill it, 2 someones." He smiled, small, private, the kind of smile that costs something and gives back more. Outside, the first stars appeared. The wind had gone quiet, the house was warm, and for the first time in 7 years, Silas Cray wasn't waiting for someone who'd never come home. He was already home. They all were.